All right, everyone, ready to dive in. Today, we're going deep, really deep, into Russia's war on Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to be looking at an interview with the Russian ambassador, Andrei Kelin.
Right?
And let me tell you some of his words. Well, you need a big grain of salt, maybe the whole shaker.
Yeah, you really have to carefully unpack what he's saying and look at the language he's using.
Exactly. And we'll do that by bringing in some other perspectives so we can get a more well-rounded picture of what's really happening.
It's a war of narratives.
It really is.
As much as it is a war of, well, you know.
Right, tanks and missiles.
Exactly.
Okay, so Caitlin says Russia's ready to talk peace.
Okay.
But only on their terms, of course.
Of course. Right.
And these terms, well, let's just say they're pretty steep demands.
Yeah. What are they asking for?
So they want Ukraine to become, neutral.
Neutral.
No more nuclear ambitions, and get this, some big territorial concessions.
Yeah, this neutrality thing, that's a really important part of their strategy. Well, you got to think about the history. Ukraine's been this buffer between Russia and the West.
Right.
And by, essentially controlling Ukraine, they're trying to kind of reassert themselves in the region.
I see.
It's about dominance, right? They want to stop NATO from expanding, which they see as this huge threat.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're trying to rewrite history a bit with this whole denuclearization demand, too.
What do you mean?
Ukraine already gave up its nukes back in the 90s, remember?
Oh, right.
In exchange for security guarantees from Russia, of course.
Guarantees that Russia obviously didn't honor.
Totally disregarded.
Yeah.
So bringing up denuclearization now, it just feels like a tactic,
Oh, absolutely. A distraction. Trying to shift the blame, make Russia look like the good guys.
Exactly. And there's another thing. Carolyn questions Zelensky's legitimacy.
Zelensky.
Yeah, Ukraine's president.
Oh, wow.
Saying he's not, the real deal. Which, again, is a way to undermine Ukraine's sovereignty.
Right.
And paint this picture of them being divided.
Right, which isn't really true.
Not at all. It's a pretty blatant attempt to delegitimize their leadership.
Yeah, and so that discord, among the Ukrainians.
Yeah. And speaking of deflecting blame, Killen really goes all in on painting Russia as the victim.
Okay.
Blaming the West, especially the U.S. and the U.K., for starting this whole thing. Classic blame shifting.
Classic.
Part of their propaganda playbook.
Absolutely.
Like when he accuses the West of pumping Ukraine full of weapons.
Right.
But he totally ignores the fact that Ukraine's, just defending itself.
They have a right to do that?
Against an invasion they didn't ask for.
Absolutely.
He even goes so far as to say Russia's economy is booming, despite all the sanctions.
Really?
But the reality's quite different, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're trying to project this image of strength, sure. But sanctions have an impact.
Big time.
Reports of their economy shrinking, shortages, and, people in Russia are not happy.
Right. It's not all sunshine and roses over there.
Not at all.
So Killen's spinning this whole narrative of Russian strength, the Western aggression, blah, blah, blah. But then we have these other sources painting a totally different picture.
Oh, interesting. What are they saying?
They're calling Russia's actions a mafia operation.
Whoa, a mafia operation.
Yeah, like they don't care about international law or Ukraine's sovereignty. Which, I mean, you look at their actions, it's not that far off.
Right.
Annexation of Crimea, meddling in elections, silencing critics, even using chemical weapons.
That's a lot to unpack.
It really shows a pattern of disregarding the rules and just using force to get what they want.
Yeah. So this idea of them as a mafia state, it's not just like an exaggeration. It's more like a way to describe how they're acting,
It makes you think, if diplomacy doesn't work with someone who plays by their own rules,
right?
What do you do then?
That's the big question facing world leaders right now.
It really is.
If they are acting like a mafia state,
Yeah.
It changes everything.
Absolutely. How we think about this war, how we think about international relations, the whole thing.
Totally.
Big stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It really challenges like everything we think we know about stopping aggression, about, keeping the world in order.
Right. Because if one country can just ignore all the rules and get away with it,
yeah,
that kind of throws everything out the window.
Totally. It makes you think, are we at like a turning point?
Hmm.
Are we moving away from like diplomacy and towards, something much more unpredictable.
Could be. Yeah, definitely something to think about. And, Kelin tries to downplay how bad the war really is.
Yeah, okay, how so?
Well, he says that Ukraine's exaggerating their losses, for example.
Oh, yeah, right.
Classic disinformation, right?
Right.
Minimize the human cost,
Mhm.
make the atrocity seem smaller,
Mhm.
and hopefully people get tired of hearing about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But we know better, don't we? We've seen those images, the bombed-out cities, the mass graves,
It's hard to ignore.
millions of refugees running for their lives. I mean, come on.
Right, right.
The evidence is everywhere, and it points to one thing: a brutal campaign
Yeah.
targeting civilians.
Yeah.
This isn't just war. It's an attempt to wipe out Ukraine's identity, their culture, everything.
It's terrifying, and it's happening right now in Europe in the 21st century.
It's crazy. It really shows what's at stake here. And Kelin also dismisses the International Criminal Court, the war crimes investigation.
What does he say about that?
He says Russia's doing their own trials.
Oh.
Like they're above international law.
It's like another thing about that mafia state idea,
Right.
making their own rules, their own justice system.
Total impunity. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's like they live in a different reality where facts don't matter and nobody's held responsible. But even with all that propaganda deflection, Kelin does let some stuff slip.
Oh, really?
Or-
What kind of stuff?
He admits that the war has cost Russia a lot
Economically.
economically, and they've lost a lot of soldiers too.
Interesting.
So, he's trying to push this narrative of Russian strength and resilience,
Right.
but the truth kind of peeks through those cracks.
Yeah, like they're trying to hide something.
Exactly. It's like trying to hold sand. The tighter you squeeze, the more slips out.
Right, right.
And it just highlights that difference between what Keelan's saying and, well, what our other sources are saying about Russia being a mafia state.
Right.
That contrast is really important because it forces us to face some hard truths about this war.
Like how to stop it.
Yeah. If normal diplomacy doesn't work, what are the options?
It's a tough one.
It really is. Some say we need a stronger military response, give Ukraine the weapons they need to really fight back.
Okay.
Others think we should focus on tougher sanctions, isolating Russia completely. And some say we need to do both, a multi-pronged approach to really put the pressure on.
Right, hit them from all sides.
But the bottom line is, we can't just sit back and do nothing. The international community has to act.
The stakes are too high.
Way too high, not just for Ukraine, but for global security, for everyone.
Absolutely.
If Russia gets away with this, invading a neighbor, breaking all the rules, changing history to fit their story,
Right.
it sets a really bad example. It's a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, imagine if any country could just do that, invade whoever they want, ignore international law. It'd be chaos.
Exactly. And that brings us to you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on all of this? What stands out to you from this conversation? This war is complex, and calling Russia a mafia state, that's a big deal. It raises a lot of questions. What resonates with you most about this conversation? What questions are swirling in your mind as we unpack the complexities of this war and the implications of labeling Russia as a mafia state?
It's a label that certainly carries weight, and it should make us question what tools are most effective in pushing back against such a force.
Right.
After all, traditional diplomacy, it relies on a certain level of good faith and shared values, right?
Yeah, which seems to be totally missing here. I mean, Kalen's whole interview is like a masterclass in deflection, distortion, and just straight-up denial.
Totally.
It's clear Russia's waging war on, well, two fronts,
Yeah.
the battlefield and the information space.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important now more than ever to really be critical of the information we're consuming,
Yeah.
to look for different perspectives, different sources, and to support independent journalism.
For sure.
We can't let the Kremlin control the narrative.
100%. We have to stay informed, engage in these tough conversations, and hold our leaders accountable. We can't turn a blind eye to what's happening to the Ukrainian people or the threat this war poses to, well, the world order, really.
The world's watching, and history will judge how we respond to this. It's a real test. Will we stand up for the principles of, sovereignty, territorial integrity, the rule of law?
Right.
Or will we let, a so-called mafia state call the shots, rewrite the rules?
These aren't just theoretical questions, are they? I mean, they have real-world consequences. The decisions we make now, well, they're shaping the world of tomorrow. And it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, right?
Right.
But we can't just give up. We can't afford to be apathetic.
I agree. Hope lies in action. Hope lies in solidarity. Hope lies in our collective determination to support Ukraine, to hold Russia accountable, and to build a world where peace and justice, they actually win.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's remember the people of Ukraine. Their courage, their resilience, let's amplify their voices, share their stories, and demand an end to this war.
And let's learn from this. Understand the warning signs and work together so that these kinds of tragedies don't happen again.
The future, yeah, it's uncertain. But one thing's for sure, we can't just sit back and watch. Now's the time to act.